Fortunately, it acts up sometimes, but we should be getting the red circle on Facebook momentarily. I think we are good. Yes, we are. Find my live feed so I can. Usually we get some people watching because I record at random times. It's never guaranteed. Let's see if it's going. No, so I'm not seeing it on the app, but I know that we're live right now. So we're gonna wait for that to show up. All right, everyone. Well, up there it is. We are live. We are back with another live episode. I am behind on uploading episodes to Spotify and YouTube. So for those of you out there, as soon as I get a chance to upload those, I will put the notices out there. Um, I am joined today by Chief Chief John Fogg. John has come to Orwigsburg. He taught the art of reading smoke class for us, for some of you that may have attended it. He was on my short list of people I wanted to have on because he is a career fireman. He does have relationship with the local volunteer house near him. And if you follow some of the, I would say, the pages on Facebook, specifically the groups, building construction stuff, John always posts some really what's the word? Thorough information that all of us should be reading. It's not always the most glamorous stuff, but it's important stuff nonetheless. And right before we started recording, you know, we were talking about like the gaps from the volunteer world to the career world, and where even in our own essentials program, there's gaps. So hopefully this episode can maybe turn you on to filling your own gaps within your own department. But anyways, John, you just had a little bit of a promotion, so give us the rundown, man. What are you doing with yourself these days?
Oh, everything. So yeah, I'm obviously the fire chief or now the district chief for Colonial Park. So Colonial Park's part of Lower Paxton Township. We went through a merger. Colonial Park was its own individual entity, and now it's part of Lower Paxton Bureau of Fire. Obviously struggling with the same things every volunteer fire service is with lack of manpower. So the township hired some career staff to integrate into a combination system, and that means retitling everything. So fire chiefs became
Mm,
district chiefs. Job wise, nothing changed, but it just made the hierarchy flow better. So you can call it a demotion or just a realignment, but went from a fire chief to a district chief there. And at
mhm.
work, I was the captain at New Cumberland Army Depot for the rescue company for the better part of 13 years, and got promoted to assistant chief operations effective yesterday. So yesterday was my first shift.
Congratulations there.
Yeah, so I guess I would be probably in trouble at work if I didn't say I'm speaking on behalf of myself and not the federal government. They get mad when you do that. So
Oh
we'll
yeah, I'm
we'll tie
sure
everything to Lower Paxton Bureau of Fire that I'm doing today. Not speaking
that'll
on
work.
behalf of the federal government or talking about DLA or New Cumberland. So
Yeah, probably don't want to do that. The disclaimer is loud and clear. I'll make sure that that doesn't get edited out. No. Um, where so and from a podcast standpoint, no matter what kind of podcast I'm doing, because I have another one that I do on the side, that's much bigger than this one, but I always like to know people's story, because I think it helps set the baseline of like where people come from, and their history within the fire service. So like, how did you get started in the fire service in general?
I think like most people, my family, my dad specifically. So my dad was a volunteer in a little town called Salem Township, right outside of Berwick, which is a little town as well. Closest thing's probably Bloomsburg or Wilkes-Barre between the two on Route
Mhm.
11. So that was kind of my backstory was my dad volunteered and took me to the firehouse as a kid. You know, we'd go down there for whatever and be involved and go to calls and everything else. And then became a junior firefighter and decided I liked it enough that I would rather do it for a career than just do it for free and enjoy going to work every day. So I told
Mhm.
somebody the other day, I mean, I've been truly blessed for next week starts my 23rd year. In the career fire service, and I've been blessed to go to work every day and be happy about a job I have instead of being miserable going to work. And I really wish everybody would have that same ability to go do something they enjoy doing, instead of going to work because they have to, more or less going to work because they want to. And even days that we know there's stuff going on that we have to deal with and things that are not popular, it's still better than going anywhere else to work. Like it's still the
That's
best job in
awesome.
the world, regardless of what's going on.
Yeah.
But yeah, my dad really drug me into the volunteer fire service side, and it just took off from there. Graduated high school, went to college for Penn State for computer engineering. 3 years of that, and decided I didn't really like it, and it wasn't for me, at least for the rest of my life. But in 2000, 2001, everybody was being pushed to go to college. Go to college no matter
Facts.
what. Just go to college. You have to go to college, or you're a loser. So I did. I went to Penn State, and I decided I didn't like it. Found a fire job in the federal government, first at Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma City. I went out there for 3 years and then transferred back to Pennsylvania. Dad was real proud that I dropped out of college. He was not happy at all, especially since he was paying for part of it. But I think he's pretty proud now. So I think I did all right. I think he's
You made
okay
up
with the
for it in the
drop.
end.
Yeah, I think he's okay with the drop out of college now at this point in my life.
I would say so. My, it's funny. I was just talking with Nick Miller. I don't know if you know Nick. His son, was just hired down in Prince George County. He's like 20 years old. My son, our son, graduates here, in the beginning of June. He wants to go career as well. Started the same way. Started as a junior at 14, but and the little shit has more time on him knob at 18 years old with finishing essentials with with don't get me wrong, like there's no reckless abandon there. He's been taught the right way and he's been held back appropriately as a younger inexperienced fireman. Like, he's not been thrown right into a shitstorm. Not totally anyway. Um but but he's been trained the right way. Like
Yep.
he's he's cautious but pretty solid and he makes good decisions. Like it's one of those situations, not where it's a junior that he's not a junior that carries like 15 pagers and wants to be a member of five different departments and like and then just shows up on calls and stands there. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
the kid works and I'm proud of him for that reason. Hopefully the career path does fall into place. But it seems like we're seeing there's definitely a we're already off topic, but that's okay. Like with that recruitment level in there's two paths that younger firefighters they either go like a EMS career path to the fire service, or maybe go to college, stay with a volunteer house, and then end up going on to a career, but they still stay within the volunteer fire service. So we've been pretty blessed with some awesome they're no longer junior members. They're now senior members, but younger firemen as of recent. So they're a
Yeah.
blessing in disguise. I
Well, and I
know,
think it's a whole different ball game today than it was 20 years ago or
yeah, when we were younger.
2000,
Yeah.
2001, 25 years ago. Trying to get hired was impossible. I mean, I tested for Montgomery County, Maryland, and we had a chief walk into an auditorium and say, if you're not a medic, you're probably not getting hired. And a couple thousand people testing and knowing that you're probably not getting hired. And that was kind of the stance everywhere. It was very difficult to get hired. And now you talk to anybody like, Floyd, who's one of my best friends from Harrisburg, and
Floyd's been
everybody's
on the
list,
podcast.
yeah, everybody's list is one third or one quarter of what it's been in the past. You used to have 1,000 people testing. Now you have 300 people testing.
Yeah.
So for the most part, everybody's list has really gotten short, and we've put more kids on career jobs here in the last 3, 4 years from the volunteer firehouse than we had in the 10 years previous, probably, just because it's become almost you have your choice of where you want to work. And we've
Yeah.
had kids come back and say, "Hey, I have a job offer from DC and somewhere else. Which one do I take?" And it comes down to really, do you want to go work in a city that may pay a little less and have a good pension, or do you want to go work in a more suburban area that may pay more now but have less of a pension and less fires?
Yeah.
So there's decisions that people got to make, and everybody makes decisions. But I tell all of them, any fire job's a good fire job. If you decide you don't like it or there's something better, you can always keep applying and go somewhere else and go through another academy and do whatever.
Yeah.
But the grass ain't always greener on the other side either. I mean, we've seen that as well. We've seen people bounce department to department thinking it's something better and then, saying, "Hey, I think I made a mistake doing this."
Yeah. They realize it's still the same job. Um, I think the other part of that too is you're seeing more paid opportunities. Like you're seeing the
Yeah.
combination department, the Um, I know like Western Berks, Jared, he's got a combination of like 7 full-time guys, but then even they're not really volunteers anymore. They get paid a stipend of sorts, an hourly stipend depending on what they're doing and stuff like that. So there's like more and more of those types of opportunities are coming. But
Yeah,
I think what's cool now, what we're seeing, like our son's senior year, he's been taking EMT as a senior in high school. He's taking it in school. So he's going to graduate with his EMT essentially. He takes his I think he takes his national test like the day after graduation, and he can go right into at least working emergency services on the EMS route to start. So he'll have that base experience wherever he gets hired. He might have to go through EMT, might not have to. I think every academy seems to be a little bit different the way that they do it, but that doesn't hurt to the extra time training and going into a paid department where maybe they do things just a little bit different despite protocols. You should expect that they're going to train you to do it how they want you to do it, not, not the way you learn from some local level instructors. You know what I mean? And that's
yeah,
not a dig. I just, for those of you, that's not a dig. I'm just saying in some ways essentials is like public school system. Public school system, they teach to the test and you take state testing. Essentials is kind of the same way. They teach to the test. There's a lot of things that you don't learn without experience or working within an academy. But
yeah.
anyways,
I
moving
think
on.
you're right. I think you're going to see a whole lot more in Pennsylvania because I mean, if people are being honest with themselves, and nobody's excelling at volunteer fire service right now. Everybody's on the decline. And there's a whole lot of
100%.
fire companies looking at buying apparatus and building fire stations, but ain't looking at the numbers of people they have, and you can have the biggest firehouse and the most fire trucks, but if you ain't got people to put on them, you ain't got a fire department.
Dude,
And
you
we're,
just
we're seeing it even
literally
locally.
repeated the words I said like the last 2 episodes.
Yeah, I mean, we were even seeing it
100%.
locally. I mean, the only difference with Lower Paxton Township is we were honest and open about it and said, look, we see this coming. It's like a freight train, and if we don't get ahead of it, we're going to be behind it. And we just caught it like right at the right point where we were starting to struggle, and we got the township on board with hiring initially 8, and then they're going to hire more next year and go to 24-hour coverage. But we saw, if you're being honest with yourself, we saw it coming, and you can turn a blind eye to it and pretend you're still doing great stuff, but if you're putting people's lives at risk, how great are you? And we have a lot of people running in 18 different directions saying they're the best volunteer fire department and they don't need any help. But in reality, anybody that knows the backstory and has a history and watches the CAD and listens to the radio knows exactly what's happening. And you can fool some of the people all the time, but you can't fool all the people all the time.
Dude, you are preaching gospel right now, and more people need to listen to it. Like, and some people in my department might not agree with what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it. Like, our department's we're pretty good. We're not amazing, but we're pretty good, and our manpower's okay. But we're in the process of building a multi-million-dollar station. We have $1 million engine rescue coming, and we have probably less than 20 active members. And I'm like, and I've said this, I've been saying this for probably the better part of a year or two. Like, we can do all of this stuff, and it's great that we have this opportunity to get all this stuff, but what are we doing about the manpower shortage?
Yeah.
Because during the day, we're blessed that we have like 4 or 5 people that work from home, and those people are able to basically fill that day shift time frame. But what about the other people who are working elsewhere and then they come back but they still have lives that they things to do as well. So there's still a shortage in some way, shape, or form. Like, you're getting apparatus off with 3 people. Yeah, maybe in the career world that happens some places, but compare they're apples and oranges. 3 volunteers, unless you happen to be really, really lucky and have like 3 guys that really got their shit together, compared to 3 career guys that train every week, they do it every week, they know their rigs in and out. Like, they're not the same. And one of my biggest um rabbit holes or soapboxes is we aren't doing anything to retain the people we have. And in my opinion, retention takes care of the recruitment side. But that's just that's my opinion. I'm no professional or anything, but
Yeah, I mean,
um,
I would argue a little bit that we've had some volunteers that I would take over some of the career guys. I don't think the career volunteer thing makes much of a difference as much as kind of what you hit is the only benefit to the career side is they're paid and have the hours to dedicate
but you're right,
to the task at hand
right,
versus trying to only do it for 4 hours a week or 8 hours a week and trying to master it. Um, but at the end of the day, I mean, I've had some guys I said I'd hire over some of the guys I currently have that I work with, you know.
yeah,
It's just whether or not they dedicated themselves to do it or had the time to do it. And generally, kind of goes with the times that we're in. Nobody has extra time anymore. So where guys and girls used to dedicate, 15, 20 hours to the volunteer fire service every week, now between having kids, working jobs, if you don't catch a volunteer early in high school and get them into one of the high school programs or the voc tech programs and get them their essentials program and fire one and EMT, if you don't get all that done on the front end, then they don't have time to do it on the back end when they're 18, 20 years old. And it's no different than Boy Scouts. I was in Boy Scouts and I was in it to win it from, Cub Scouts all the way up through I got a driver's license. And then when I got a driver's license, more important things in my mind came up and Boy Scouts dropped off.
hmm
And I think that's with anything. If you don't get them into it early and get them started on training early, there's really too many other options in life that people are involved in to get them the amount of time necessary to become proficient at what we're asking them to do. And then
mm,
I think really the caveat is you just need to find a balance, right? We were doing great with volunteers. Everything was running 100% volunteer. We said, hey, we're having a problem. Um, so what can we do at that point to kind of supplement, And we tried stipend programs, incentive programs, and that works. And as long as that's working, you're good. But then at some point, there's probably going to be a point where that's no longer going to cover the gap, and now you need to look at full-time coverage or part-time coverage. So it's just a progressive thing going on in the fire service, and I think it's applying everywhere. And some
yeah,
places can sustain it longer than others. Fairview Township, outside of our base where I work, they've been doing part-time employment for a long time. They've done very good with it. But the problem is if those guys find something better or a better place to work or anything,
yeah.
then
It's a revolving door.
the pool of people to pull from drops.
Yeah,
And the way it's going right now is every firefighter that has their qualifications has their choice of where they want to work part-time because there's
sure,
so many places hiring part-time.
yeah.
So I throw an extra dollar an hour or $2 an hour at you, and then instead of working here, I work there.
Yeah. What's the just hypothetically as those departments, your department, the departments around you have changed to like a part-time or combo, what's the call volume look like for those departments? I'm curious.
I think I was talking to guys from State College from Alpha, Chief Bear was up there and he had a tie to this area. So we have a bunch of connections up there, guys that teach, guys that work, guys that went to Penn State and whatnot. And one of their Q points, I think, was 1,000 calls. And that seemed like I think that was Chief Bear's theory was 1,000 calls is a good number. When you go above that, it becomes a strain on the system. And I think we saw the same thing. When I got to Colonial Park, it was roughly 600 calls a year. And then the goal was to try and hit 1,000. Guys were excited about hitting 1,000, but then when we hit 1,000 and it kept going, that seemed to be where it started to become a strain on the system where you couldn't
Mm,
guarantee coverage and guarantee crews were around to make sure things were always covered. So that
yeah.
seems to be the 1,000 calls seems to be the riding point of where it's busy enough to become more of a chore than just for fun. And
Yeah.
getting up at night and answering calls overnight and stuff like that, where below that, the calls are infrequent enough at less than 1,000 that it's not a chore. It's more of a volunteer job that's actually still fun until it becomes an actual task.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I think that this is my personal opinion. This is just from what see locally. Like, I'm gonna give you an example. Union Fire Company or Union Fire Company out of Hamburg, Pennsylvania. Their ballpark 800, 900 calls. They are stretched thin. They're right on the 78 by Cabela's there. And like they're all 100% volunteer. That department is and they're doing everything. They have a rescue, they have a stick. They do a lot of brush calls in the northern Berks area. They're on 78 constantly. Like they're just below that, somewhere between 8 to 900. I think they've been over 1,000 when they were doing EMS. I don't think they do as much EMS now. But their call volume's up. And I think the one caveat that people don't discuss though is like call volume. If you don't have volunteers, the call volume drops to what you
Mhm.
can and can't handle. And that's where the finding that happy place of like if you have like, a pretty stout list of active qualified firefighters, you can definitely handle 600, 700, 800, 900 calls. It's when it's finding that happy place in the middle. That seems to be the hard part for everybody.
Yeah.
Um, but
I mean, at the end of the day, we took the same mindset here. Chief Graham that we have as the deputy chief for Lower Paxton. The mindset has always been we want people available. We don't even care if they run calls, but the goal would be there's always people available. So if there's a call, it's covered.
right,
And I
it's safe.
think that's some of the misconception with the volunteer fire services. Instead of like a lot of people are looking at, well, we seem to get out for every call. Well, that's easy to say, but how quick were you out? What were the response times? And did it make a
And what
difference?
did you get out with? Is
And
it
what
a
did you get out
driver?
with? Right. And
Is it
if
a
you look
driver
at,
and a 65-year-old senior member that can help you set up water, maybe?
yep.
Like
So
yeah,
I think that's the bigger thing is a lot of people look at, well, we didn't really fail that many calls, but we also got lucky a whole bunch of times where there was no calls that we got caught and failed. And we knew for years, at Colonial Park, we knew our bad times were 6 to 9 o'clock in the morning because of the way we're structured. A whole bunch of career guys that are going on shift and coming off shift, and there's a gap in the morning. Almost every day we had a gap. And the fact that we didn't fail a call at 6 to 9 in the morning doesn't mean we were good. It just meant we got lucky and didn't have a call. And we
yeah,
spent a lot of time, explaining that to politicians and making sure supervisors understood like we're not just looking at how many calls we handled and how many we responded with and what our average manpower was. We can see gaps on paper where we know we don't have people available. And we're just getting lucky. We're just playing the lottery and hoping we don't have a fire between 6 and 9 a.m.
yeah,
versus fixing the problem that we don't have a lot of people available at 6 to 9 a.m. And we
yeah,
were a little different. A lot of our people are career firefighters. So they're on shift for a day and it's very hard to predict. It's not like we're short during the day and we're heavy at night. Our problem was it just depended when everybody's shift lined up. One guy's working a 24/72, one girl's working a 24/48, one guy works 2 days, 2 nights, and four off. And when you start overlaying all those shifts, every once in a while, everybody's at work and there's nobody available. And then the next day, there's nine people floating around. And it
yeah,
just made it very sporadic to try and plan what we're looking for in terms of what we need for coverage. So that became the sticking point, not the fact that we needed help. The
yeah,
sticking point really became what hours do we need help and how do we address it? And the first step was just daylight. But we knew at night, there's times at night we're short because guys are going on shift. Um, and we know they don't want to run calls after midnight because they're getting up at 3 in the morning to drive to, Anne Arundel or DC or Loudoun County or wherever all of our people are working at. They're
right.
leaving early in the morning. So usually after 9 or 10 o'clock, like, look, unless it's really like, unless you really need me, I'd rather not get up and go to a call tonight.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. That's tough. That's the age old question though. I'm just checking. We got some viewers, and Nick Miller is the chief in Pine Grove he said you need to have duty shifts at that point, talking about having a high volume but having enough people to do it, cover the shifts. Live-ins are a key if possible. And live-ins are a commodity if you can one afford it, have the facility. Like, like we currently don't have the facility. The goal with the new fire station is to have the facility to be able to have live-ins. For that reason, we currently are in an old garage that's 3 bays, and we have a day room and an office and a kitchen, and that's it. And the kitchen is very kitchenette. It's not even a real kitchen. So like we don't have the space for that at all. And but I think Nick is right. That's the direction. That seems to be the next step in coverage is once a department is able to spend the money and put that facility in, live-ins is definitely an option if you can pull from the key people. We have a Penn State. Ironically, you said you went to Penn State. I don't know which campus. You go to Maine?
I went to Hazleton for 2 years and then I went to Maine for the last year.
Oh,
The
okay.
last year before I dropped out. I mean, I should have been there
Yeah,
for
yeah,
two
yeah,
years.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. I I went to Penn State as well. I went to Schuylkill though, for 2 years. But we have Penn State Schuylkill that's like right next to us. So like it's a mile down the road. And when I went to Penn State, I could still make, actually at that time I could still make the apparatus from Penn State, believe it or not. For those of you out there, well, no, it's only like a mile and a half down the road, but um, it's
Yeah, I mean,
it's just it's a
one of the
problem.
benefits to teaching, like I enjoy teaching because I get to go everywhere and see everybody, and I
Yeah.
see all different systems, and State College is one that's had a
The
duty shift program for
alpha,
a long time, and they have a
yeah,
huge draw because they have 50,000 people that show up
right,
every semester. So I have 50,000 people to pick from. This area, Colonial Park, Lower Paxton, Susquehanna Township, even Middletown, a lot of that was either Penn State Middletown or Hack, and Hack had the fire science program. And a lot of people took it for granted. That was just kind of a natural draw for firemen to the area, but now that's kind of weaning off, and they're talking about not running the fire program. So our live-in program, and I think everybody's live-in program, took a hit simply because of not having the colleges drawing the people. But I would agree, with him that the living program is really what made us successful for a lot of years. And then right about COVID is where we saw the downturn with the colleges shutting down online classes, and there's no real reason to go live at the firehouse when I don't have to go anywhere for classes. And then it never picked back up.
right.
But again, that was a big gap filler for us. Even when we didn't have a lot of new volunteers coming in, we still had 6 or 8 kids showing up every semester that would come knocking on the door and want to be a living and live for free and go to college programs. And some people have that opportunity or that benefit because they have a college in the area, and some don't. But
Yeah,
I think the shifts really is what helps you plan what's going on, the duty shifts. And if you can't fill them, then that obviously identifies a problem. Some of the more rural areas, like up by Lewistown, there's a couple companies up there where, the former fire commissioner Ed Mann's from, they went together and made essentially a regional duty shift where they'll use a couple different fire companies, but they'll have a crew and an engine in service that at least there's one staffed engine that's
oh,
responding to multiple
nice.
different jurisdictions. And he did that well before his time, or well before what was normal to do things like that. The merger and stuff, they were doing that years ago before it was popular.
Hmm.
And really ahead of his time in terms of, ingenuity and thinking outside the box where a lot of people didn't want to work with their neighbors. I think between the lack of volunteers and the way the money is now for apparatus and everything else, I think you're going to see a lot more forced mergers where people are going to have to get along,
I
um,
agree.
because it's the only way they're going to survive. You either need a
Completely
large
agree.
tax base or you need to get along with people and say, hey, we might not need all this apparatus. We might be able to merge into something else or start looking at locations of firehouses and how far apart they are.
Yeah, one of the things like where we're at in Southern Schuylkill, like we have multiple departments around us. We're a solo department in our town. Our town is relatively small, but we have multiple departments around. But you see, here's another caveat to having money and not having money. Like we have departments around us that have halls and bars and stuff like that. They have pretty solid funding from that situation. And whereas like our department, we've always been a 100% dry fire company. We do not have a bar. We do not have a hall. We don't have any of that stuff for the income side. Now we're blessed to have a fire tax that's only new in the last like 5 or 6 years or something like that. So it's not a ton of money, but it's a hell of a lot better than what we were relying on before. We're not rich at all. That's
Yeah.
just enough to cover the purchase of the finally replacing a 20-year-old rescue. But you know, it's those other departments have a lot of volunteers from within the community that aren't active firefighters that are helping raise funds, whereas we don't have those volunteers to do our fundraising. So our volunteers, our active volunteers, are doing the fundraising too.
Yeah.
And it's you talk, in our initial conversation to about this podcast was like filling in the gaps on training and like building construction and stuff like that. We have to juggle all of the fundraising and the this and the that and the community projects and all this stuff and train at the same time and live our lives and work 2 jobs and take care of our families
Yeah.
and that's where it seems like we're in this weird crossroads right now in the volunteer fire service where we almost don't know which direction to go.
Yeah. And I mean, the question is the juice worth the squeeze, right? So we had Christmas tree sales at Colonial Park for a better part of 40 or 50 years. And I don't know that anybody was looking to get away with it or get away from it because they wanted to. It was more because it just wasn't feasible for the amount of hours being put in by volunteers and the net profit being made. There were so many easier ways to do that, even if it meant a fire tax that allowed those, $200 a week being donated to sell Christmas trees being used for training and everything else. So I mean, what really is worth it? And that's very area specific. We're a very transient area. We have
Sure.
a lot of garden apartment complexes, and the Colonial Park area of Lower Paxton is very transient. The Lingelstown area of Lower Paxton is very community based. And Lingelstown has always been head and shoulders in terms of fundraising. They've never struggled because their community is very community based, where ours is very transient. You go across the river, Duncannon was killing it with raffles and online raffles and stuff that started during COVID, and they were absolutely killing it. And some of the school kill companies were absolutely killing it with online raffles.
Yeah,
We did it for
we're
a little bit, but it was very hit or miss what ones worked and what ones didn't. And a lot of that is just the area that you're in and whether or not it's successful or not, you know.
yeah.
And it's great for the people that it is successful, especially when they have whole organizations on the side that are just managing fundraising, ladies auxiliary or
Hmm.
auxiliary members or social members that are just managing the fundraising. That's worth its weight in gold. That's hours I'm not
Oh,
losing as
absolutely.
an active volunteer that can be going on calls or training or maintenance of equipment, and all those things suffer when the fundraising has to be done to keep the lights on.
Yes.
Um,
100%. You are
and that
you
was some of the
are
things that came up with our township, when we talked to the politicians and educated them was, look, yeah, people like volunteering, but they signed up to volunteer to be a volunteer firefighter, not to be a volunteer fundraiser. And nobody else is raising their own money to do, tasks that are public safety driven. The sheriffs aren't holding a fundraiser to buy their guns. It just doesn't happen. So expecting all the volunteers to raise all the money for things that have gone up 300%, like a fire truck that went from $1 million to $3 million for a tower ladder in the course of 5 years, asking somebody to raise $3 million of fundraising money is insane for what they're trying to do and the service they're providing. So, and I think a lot of it is we don't talk much about the volunteer fire service and educate people. We're kind of
Mhm.
a close-knit gang, like a biker gang that you get jumped in and nobody talks to anybody. So either you're in or you're out, and we don't do a very good job educating the public or the supervisors or the politicians or anybody, and even our own members sometimes on the ins and outs of what needs done, other than I want to get on a fire truck and go to calls and oh, hey, we got to raise money because we need money.
Yeah.
And I think when you start educating people and looking at actual numbers and looking at what's happening, uh, everybody is pretty receptive to it. We went through with the hiring. There was very few naysayers about the hiring of career staff. The majority of the public, the majority of everybody was behind hiring because they understood the need for it. And there was a couple naysayers, worried about how high taxes are going to go. But at the end of the day, I mean, you can say you can't put a price on public safety, but we do it every day. If there was no price, there'd be an open pocketbook for the volunteer fire service out of the township or borough or municipality. And that's simply not the case. We put a price on public safety every day. And that's a catchphrase that everybody wants to use. Oh, there's no price too high for public safety, but we literally put a price cap on it every day. And at some point you have to. You can't say it's unlimited, or it wouldn't be sustainable. But we put a price tag on stuff every day and decide whether or not it's worth it.
Yeah. You're like I said before, man, you're freaking you're on fire right now with everything that you're saying because I've heard it before. I've said it before. It's so nice hearing someone else have the exact same thoughts and the understanding that sooner or later your your community is going to have to make a decision. And I say community using that in that involves the chiefs not sugarcoating the picture and being reality based with our community leaders, our borough managers, our borough councils, township supervisors, whoever, and like saying like, hey, this is a real problem. I don't have the answer right now. And honestly, the answer always relies on funding. But if there's no cap on it, well, the cost of public safety, then the community can't complain when their taxes go up 2 mils or 2.5 mils so that the funding is available. And but there's still going to be complaints. And the other part of that the volunteer fire service also I think misses sometimes is once once that implementation happens, and say you go to a combination department and you're starting to pay people, right? Your approach to the fire service has to be more professional than ever because they're paying you for a service that you have to be efficient at.
Yep.
It's not show up and have and I harp on this all the time. It's not show up with a beard and full SCBA and acting like you're going to be fighting a fire now and getting away with that anymore. You have to be compliant with everything, not only with the standards that we're supposed to comply with, but also, um, you know, it's a job now. It's a
Yeah.
legitimate job that you're getting paid for. You have to be within the rules. And the
Well, and
volunteer fire service has to be prepared to make that shift because a lot of us are complacent with that stuff.
I think we were never held accountable in the volunteer fire service, mostly because everybody is ignorant to what happens. The public is generally ignorant to an emergency. They know a fire truck shows up and
Sure.
they assume everybody's doing what they're supposed to. If it burns down
Correct.
or somebody dies, they just assume that's what had to happen. We couldn't change that.
Right.
And I think you're starting to see, especially our own internal, fire service people, like Hifty and Hard from the Yard, like they are tearing their own apart, and sometimes rightfully so because things are
Oh,
happening that
100%.
should be viewed as unacceptable in the fire service. Those things
100%.
should be viewed as fire deficiencies. And we've been shielded where I've always said the difference between the cops and firemen is everybody thinks they know what a cop's supposed to do, but nobody knows what a fireman's supposed to do. So every day you get on Facebook, everybody has an opinion on what went wrong with a police stop or a police shooting and how it should have been handled better. They're all self-proclaimed experts on the police service, but that's never happened to the fire service, and it's slowly happening more and more. And especially with the digital era and having videos and pictures of everything. But
Hmm.
ideally, I mean, we should be doing that ourselves. And if we're not, we're doing ourselves a disservice. Every fire we have now, we try to gather the tapes, any helmet cams, any ring doorbells, and we write an AAR. And we're pretty honest, and it's hard for a lot of people to crucify themselves. Um, and I mean, I'm pretty hard on people at work and at the volunteer fire service, but I would tell them I'm harder on myself. Like you're never gonna make me feel worse about a mistake I made than I already made myself feel. And if you're not
100%.
doing that to yourself, then you're not doing yourself any favors, especially from an officer standpoint. If
We're not
you're
doing any,
if
but yeah, I was
yeah,
just going to say,
if
from
you're an
officer
officer
standpoint,
turning
you're
a
not doing
blind eye,
anybody favors.
yeah, if you're an officer turning a blind eye to stuff that's not acceptable, not having difficult conversations, then you're helping nobody, including your department, your people that you're responsible for, or the public. And I mean, I'm pretty brutally honest about stuff, and it's very hard to write a very neutral after action report because a lot of people are gonna automatically kind of shield themselves or try to justify what they did and find a reason for it. But I mean, we have a group of text message that goes back and forth, and I mean, it is brutal, but it is honest, and you're not going to hide the truth when it comes down to it, and people get called out all the time, and it is what it is. But at the end of the day, if you're not trying to fix those deficiencies, then what are you doing? The fire doesn't care who shows up. Doesn't matter if it's the best volunteer fire service, the worst volunteer fire service, or a career volunteer fire service. It doesn't matter which shows up, combination, paid, volunteer. The job and the standards are still the same. And I think NFPA, one of the good things at NFPA, there's a whole lot of bad things, but their training standard that talks about, timelines to get a hose line in place, I don't think it matters who you are. Those standards kind of apply. If you can't put an air pack on in 60 seconds or less, that's a problem. If you can't stretch a hose line and be ready to have water in it in 90 seconds, that's a problem, and it doesn't matter who you are. That standard applies across the board because the fire is still the same fire. And I think that's some of my heartache with the volunteer and career thing is the standard is still the standard, and it is a minimum standard. That doesn't mean we stop there. We still try and get better, but the standard is still the standard. And if you're below that, being a volunteer is not an excuse to say, well, we couldn't get a crew together because we're volunteer, or we couldn't stretch a hose line that quick because we're volunteer. That's not an excuse. That's still a bar that should be met by anybody.
Yes, 1,000%. And that's where you hit the the time gap, the filling the gap of training versus getting sucked into fundraising, getting sucked into the other stuff. But I don't we've kind of that's a dead horse. We've kind of hit that one pretty hard at this point. And to go back to the Hiffity stuff. Listen, I at first when I first started seeing that, I'm not going to say I was offended, but I was like, these guys are trying to do their best, whatever. We don't know the circumstances of that call. But the more and more I dove into it, and then the more I got into this podcasting from the fire service side, I was like, damn. I was like, that's a hard lesson to admit, but it's all correct. Like it's
Yep.
all correct. Like you can't say that any of I mean, maybe some context to certain calls or pictures or whatever, and there's a satire um approach to it, but the fact of the matter is that it exists because it's a real problem and you can't deny the problem just because you're offended that whatever. And that's literally the complacency of the volunteer fire service in some ways. We are our own worst enemies sometimes.
Well, yeah, I think it's okay to say you tried your best when you're learning to swim or you're trying your best riding a bike.
Sure.
But when you're putting people's lives on the line, trying your best doesn't count, right? Like people are
Correct.
dying because you tried your best and it sucks. And there's no other way around that, you know? Hey, I tried my best. Geez, we really tried. Well, people died, right?
Yeah,
It's a whole different level of playing when you talk about emergency service or anything that has lives attached to it. And I think, you know, when you look at the military and some of the special services, they are probably some of the best at eating their own and holding their own accountable because that's how they got to the point they're at. You know, the top tier people in the military didn't get there and operate the way they operate by saying, well, you know, he's not as good as the rest of us, but he's trying. They got there by cutting guys that didn't meet a standard and only took the best of the best to get there. And I think on the paramilitaristic side of things, if we took more of that perspective on the career and volunteer fire service, we'd have a much better group of firefighters on both sides of the coin, you know?
for sure. For sure. So let's talk about filling those gaps, especially the training side and the one of the deficient side is the building construction side and how you approach that. What does your department do, for example, from a training perspective?
So we do a lot of, well, it's kind of changed along the way. So if you go back 15 years ago, you know, we did a lot of Tuesday night training. Tuesday night for 4 hours is training, and we had a lot of ambitious kids, like the live-ins, that were literally competing for hours for training. Like they were trying to spend as much fireman's relief money as they could and go to as many hours as training. And they would actually brag about the fact between the three fire companies in the township, oh yeah, look how much we spent on training. And I couldn't be happier about that, right? Like of all the things I'm going to spend fireman's relief money on, training and equipment are really what it's meant for. So if they spend $30,000 going to classes at Hack, even if they didn't get something out of 16-hour class and eight of it didn't teach them anything, but eight they learned something, that's 8 hours better than they wouldn't have been if they didn't go. So we started with Tuesday nights, and that was pretty normal for years and years. And then we had the live-ins that went to a lot of classes and competed. And now it's kind of shifted because the volunteer fire service has shifted. It's a lot of daylight training. Like guys are around during the day, and we don't have near as many around at night. So the training nights are kind of suffering, at least at Colonial Park. But during the day, you know, we have Chief Crum who handles all the lower Paxton training for us. We came up with a QR code. He sent the QR code out and said, look, if you do any training, we're doing stuff. We're just not documenting it. And if we don't document it, then I can't say what we're doing. So he made a QR form that he can essentially have everybody scan. Hey, here's the number of hours. Here's the people. Here's what we covered. Here's the topics. And now we're truly getting a vision of what we're actually training on. Where before, every day guys were doing stuff in the bay, going over something for an hour or two, going out driver training, but it wasn't getting documented. Uh,
Mm,
and I think, you know, it's nice to document everything, but that also takes time. So my rule of thumb is, you know, of all the things we come up with, hey, how do we document this? If it can't be documented in 30 seconds or less, nobody's doing it. Right. So if it's a QR code that's 4 pages that I have to fill out 4 pages of information, nobody's filling it out. Nobody.
right.
Because everybody's busy. And if I can't do it right now, then I'm not doing it. You know, I got to be able to do it on my phone and do it in 30 seconds or less, or I lose
It's
that
a great
data
idea.
point. And we've done that with a lot of things. I did a site visit for accreditation for Center of Public Safety Excellence out in the Midwest, and one of their career guys said, "Hey, I'm trying to justify gym equipment, and I'm getting a lot of pushback because they want to know how much it's being used, and I don't have a good way to show that." I said, "Well, why don't you put a QR code on the door, and all your people that want gym equipment are probably going to be willing to fill it out, every time they go in the gym, check the equipment you used and write the number of minutes you used each piece of equipment. And after a year, you'll have all the data you need to say, look, the treadmill's been used every day for 5 hours a day. In fact, there's sometimes where people can't get on the treadmill because it's being used. And he thought that was the smartest thing in the world. And I'm just thinking, look, I'm good at like, I can kind of problem solve things and think through problems. And to me, it just seems like I just look at things from a different angle and say, what works the best? You know, and I'm very
Yeah.
realistic about, I know the effort people will put in terms of training. You know, people go to training for two reasons. They need the cert or they really enjoy the topic being taught.
Yeah.
And if those two things don't apply, they're not going to it. You know, the art of reading smoke class that's been going on for crazy years here, it goes in like waves, but recently it's been taken off like crazy. And I don't know why, because I don't
Mm.
even like the class. And I tell everybody when I start, like this class to me, it's the dumbest title because it's so much more than that. It's
Right.
it's buildings and layouts and
Yeah.
techniques and tactics. the smoke is just one little piece, but there's so many topics, and I just usually ramble when I teach it. And I think that's why people keep asking for it. Is it's
Yeah,
more like
could
this.
be.
It's valid topics and valid points that need talked about, not just reading smoke.
It was a
Um,
very good class, and I that was before I had any building construction actual like formal training, and I realized quickly that you were covering a lot of the building construction stuff already, and which I thought, hold on a second. Oh, that's just a phone call about it. It's nothing. And that was what I think intrigued the hell out of me when you taught the class is you didn't just it wasn't just smoke. It was the combination of all, and it was informative, and like that set the tone or the kind of set the trajectory for us to host the flashover simulator. Like that was there was the actual building construction classes, there was the artery and smoke. We're like, hey, we should get the flashover simulator. The flashover simulator was probably one of the most clear cut understanding of how it works and why people die
yeah,
when they die because of the lack of decision making in the moment where you know whether you can continue or you can't continue, and you have to stop in your tracks and turn around and get out. And learning that would those are some classes that every department should take. And what's so tough about that is the simulator is hard to come by. Like it's not there's not enough of them to go around.
yeah.
And um it's probably one of the classes that every fireman, volunteer or career, and I don't know what it's like on the career side if they have a better access to it or have their own access to do that simulation, but it's an education. That is a day of education.
Yeah, I've always, I mean, again, like we were talking about before you went live, I think fire behavior and building construction and building layout are the three missing pieces of keeping people safe and alive at a fire. Like I can show you how to throw a ladder. I can even help you throw a ladder at 3 in the morning if you've never thrown a ladder. But I can't teach you fire behavior without you getting hurt or killed if you don't understand fire behavior. And in a
Yeah,
pitch black building with smoke, it's very hard to tell you you're in trouble unless you're realizing you're in trouble. And if we put two people that are inexperienced, we're dealing with all of our volunteers, especially the living program, it would not be uncommon to have, one driver that's 27 years old and three or four kids that are 18 years old with very little experience in the engine.
yeah,
And the problem there is they might be very good tactically at doing the actual tactics, but if they don't understand fire behavior and building construction, the best tactics in the world are still going to get you killed if you don't understand the environment you're in.
right.
And I said, in the perfect world, everybody would go to essentials and they would go to a burn building, a concrete burn building where almost nothing bad could happen. And then they would do the flashover simulator to understand what a flashover looks like. And then before we ever release them into the wild, they would do an acquired burn to realize that there's a huge difference between a concrete burn building and an actual house on fire. And even the acquireds, as real as we try to make them, they're still very limited on fuel load. So the speed at which things are happening, and things are changing is
Yeah,
still slow. And even at that rate, we still get caught sometimes where things happen that we're like, oh, wow, we didn't really expect that to happen that quick.
yeah,
But we're dealing with a very minimal fuel load compared to an actual house. 4 pallets maybe and a bale of straw is nowhere near a full-size couch and upholstered furniture
a
that
hundred
when it
percent.
catches on fire, the amount of fuel coming off of that.
Yep,
And I think we just kind of set people up for failure when we allow them to stretch lines into a burn building and we send them into a room that's 4 pallets on fire, but nothing else can burn. And then we expect them to comprehend that they can't do that in the real world because they'll get killed.
yeah,
And that things around them will burn. Fire, if it's in that room and it's on fire, at a burn building, it never travels down the hallway, but it's going to travel down the hallway and up the steps and up to the next floor, up to the next room in any other building that you're going to go to. And I think we just build that Rolodex that we're building in people's heads. We build a lot of false Rolodexes because we don't tell them all these differences. We put them in a burn building. I've watched instructors, some of our own, in Pennsylvania, put people in a room to make sure they felt hot, but we never tell them if they feel hot through their gear, things are very, very bad. Like the gear we're wearing
too
today
late.
and how good it is for you to feel hot through your gear to a point that you feel like you're in trouble. You're 30 seconds or a minute past where you should have recognized you're in trouble.
Yeah,
And in a burn building, you can just walk away from it. But in a house that's on fire, everything around you is burning. Now we're jumping out windows and
yeah,
we're setting people up for failure by just showing them a false Rolodex of how bad things are instead of teaching them
Right.
When I feel like things are getting warm through my gear, yes, some heat is normal. But if it gets unbearable, I'm not in a tenable position where if I'm not spraying water or changing conditions, things are getting worse, not better.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. And I think in some ways that's been mentioned before, but I think you're hitting the nail on the head once again in regards to, and maybe that's a deficiency everywhere, but in the volunteer side for sure, the lack of experience. We talked about that. We did a podcast about Scoop training days. So three of us kind of put our heads together and had a local level training where a department would host, and we brought in 10, 11 different departments with their own people, and we had stations, and we were doing a primary search station, and I was teaching that station with Nick, and we were um surprised by the lack of knowledge of how to do a primary search and not rely on a hose line.
Yeah.
And we and we kind of looked at each other like after the first group, and we're like, oh, I think a lot of these people have never done any kind of training outside of just following a hose line. And that's the fault of our essentials program, because that's typically how you're taught. I know that's the way I was taught 20, I guess probably 28 years ago. I think I took essentials. I've been in 29 years. I remember like, oh, follow the hose line, right-handed search, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, and we're trying to explain to these people, like, listen, if you're being aggressive, calculated aggressive, doing primary search, you're not going to have a hose line. There might not even be a hose line in the building, depending on the conditions. That's where you have to recognize the conditions.
Yeah.
And we're having, and people are kind of looking at us like, I'm like, you can't be connected to the hose line and cover 100% of the room. It's not going to happen, especially if you're doing VEIS or something like that. Like that's a whole other world.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's again, those are gaps. Those are gaps that are within our own standards that cause people to maybe get hurt or hurt somebody else.
Well, and I think that's where career academies have a leg up on everybody because they know the way they want it done in their city. And Mike Lombardo, I love Mike Lombardo from Buffalo. He's an amazing person at a baseline, an amazing firefighter, an amazing fire chief, and an amazing mentor. Like he's a unicorn in the business.
Mm,
But he told guys in Buffalo when he was up there, I don't care about your pro board cert. You're working for Buffalo. I don't need to give you a pro board cert. I need a Buffalo
yeah.
Fire Academy cert that says you know how to fight fire in Buffalo. And they're able to teach their techniques in, where we spend a lot of time in Pennsylvania on generalities with an essentials program where you might go to Hack or any of the other ETAs and go through a program being taught by one person, but when you go back somewhere else, they're going to tell you a different way to do it. And some of it's our own worst enemy. We try and do things the safest way possible. So you need four people to throw a 28-foot ladder in essentials, but then you go to some truck class and we're going to tell you, no, you should be able to throw a 28 by yourself
Oh yeah.
instead of just starting right off the bat teaching you the right way to throw a ladder. We everybody at work throws a 35, everybody at Colonial Park throws a 35 by themselves just to know that they can. Not that we want you to have to throw it by yourself, but if I have
No.
to, I know I can do it, right?
Yeah. It's a ball
Um,
buster.
yeah,
I've done
and
it
it
before.
depends on the
It
ladder,
sucks.
right? There's different ladders, truss ladder versus solid beam ladder, Alcolite versus dual safety.
Yeah.
So a dual safety 35, most people can probably throw by themselves if they heal it against a building. But doing it, actually thinking you can do it and actually doing it are two different things. And if I do it once, then I know when things are going sideways, if I need to, I can,
Yeah.
and ladders are kind of like a lost art because again, it fell to the wayside. All the truck classes and all the truck things that need to get done on a fire, ladders just keeps getting bumped back simply because there's so many other things and a lack of people. Hey, I
Right.
got to get a search done. Hey, I want to take a cannon and try and slow the fire down. Hey, I got to get the roof opened. I got all these things that take priority. Ladders are really one of those things that are a nice thing to have in case I need them. But when I need them and I don't have them, it's a really big problem. So typically we don't see a lot of ladders at fires unless it's like a RIT team throwing them or somebody's hanging from a window and we need to throw a ladder. And really,
Right.
in the perfect world, proactively, it would be nice to have ladders on the fire floor, the floor above, and then working their way around the building. But then on the flip side of that, we've seen tons of people. I have pictures of fires locally and all over the place where we've wasted a tremendous amount of effort throwing ladders that weren't necessary. Ranch style
Mm,
houses with one roof line that have five ladders to it. They all go to the same roof. There's four ladders we wasted time throwing that we
right.
didn't need, right?
Right.
So we see people that are just throwing ladders to throw ladders and say how many feet of ladders they've thrown and pat themselves on the back. but how many were really necessary? And if I'm
Right.
wasting time doing this that's not necessary, what's not getting done, right? Because something could have been getting done quicker that I needed done instead of just wasting time.
Yeah.
So
Fair
yeah,
point.
the fire behavior thing, the flashover. Again, I think it depends who's teaching it. You know, anybody can light the box on fire and tell you it's a flashover, but I worry about some of the intricacies, like the way we put that fire out. We flow very little water, and we tell people, "Oh, we pencil the ceiling, and that makes it better." Well, that only works for one reason. It's still a limited fuel load, and we close all the doors and windows and don't allow any air in. If it weren't for that, the minimal amount of water wouldn't work. It would overrun you in a heartbeat.
Right.
And I hate to see people leave a flashover class and have the idea that a little bit of water put all that fire out, where
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
we're actually controlling other sides of that, including the airflow. You know,
Yeah.
so I feel like sometimes we have people leave a flashover class and they're like, "Oh, I don't need a lot of water." If I find a room on fire, you know how much water I want to flow? All of it, right?
Yeah.
Like there's no reason not to flow water until the room is completely out and vent a window out and get that room cleared out and then see what's left. But again, we go to a burn building and instructors were our own worst enemy. We tell you, "Hey, don't flow a lot of water because
Yeah.
I got to be able to rebuild this." So
Yeah.
we do everything right. We pull the hose line, stretch it, charge it, go up the steps, we turn the corner into the room, and then we teach everybody to flow water for a half second, not a minute longer,
Yeah.
because I got to be able to rebuild that set. And then that's what they have in their mind. So then we go to a house fire, they stretch a line up to a bedroom on fire, they just knock down the visible fire, and they stop,
Yeah.
and nobody's vetting the room out, opening walls up, hosing stuff down to make sure it's completely out, and to
Yeah.
check where it might be going next. Because
Yeah.
again, we it's hard to teach overhaul because we don't do it. We don't have a facility to teach overhaul. So we focus on just putting the visible fire out, and that's where the class ends. And
Yeah.
that's the Rolodex that people have built in their head.
Yeah. 100%. The idea of upsetting the formula and and spraying as you go and trying to upset the atmosphere completely so that it actually buys you more time. I know years ago, I remember having chiefs that were like, "Yeah, don't put water on the fire because you might get steam burn, or I'm sorry, don't spray too early. You might get." I'm like, "What are you talking about? Like if what's happening to the conditions above me if I'm crawling through zero visibility trying to find this thing and then all of a sudden everything goes haywire. Hell, I remember when we didn't have ticks. We didn't have thermal imaging cameras. You didn't know what the hell. You were just going off of your spidey senses. Is it hot? And if it's already hot, then it's probably too late. Like
Probably the
it's
best and worst invention of the fire service is probably the
the
thermal
thermal
imaging.
imaging camera. Yeah, I have
I
a
mean, it's great, right? For looking for victims, it's great, but we got so
sure.
focused. We got some people that are focused on it where they'd follow that
Like they're
camera into a
looking at a
building.
cell
If you
phone.
took the camera away from them, they'd be lost. They have no idea what's going on
Yeah,
because they're unaware of everything around them because all they were looking at was a camera, you know?
yeah,
And I think, Weiss and Carl Weiss and guys that put the Truck Academy together, I think do a very good job. JD O'Brien and Carl usually do like the VES station where they use cameras. And I think they do a very good job educating people that it's just another tool. Pick it up, look at it, put it down. Pick it up, scan a room, put it down,
yeah,
and get away from teaching it for overhaul and guys trying to use it to determine whether I open a wall or not. You know how far I open the wall? Until things aren't burned anymore. Like it has
yeah,
nothing to do with the camera, has nothing to do with the feeling of heat on the wall, like Essential says with the back of your hand. I'm opening a wall until nothing is burnt, and I guarantee it's not going to extend it and cause a rekindle. Right. And I think we somehow
love it.
adapted cameras to that where I'm going to look at a camera and if the wall's hot, I'm going to open it up. Well, that wall is hot even when there's no fire behind it, just from the radiant heat hitting the wall on the outside. So I'm going to open where the fire's at and I'm going to keep opening until nothing's burnt. And then I know I'm good, not relying on things like a camera to tell me where to open and where not to open.
Yeah. No, and well, that's common sense firefighting though.
Well, common
And
sense ain't so common anymore. And I think
I was
that
waiting for, I was teeing that one up for you. I was hoping you were going to say it
I
because
think
that's
it
common sense
goes,
firefighting. We
we
see
call it
that
common
sometimes
sense,
it's not
but
done that way.
well, we call it common sense, but really it goes back to it. It's the experience that was brought into the volunteer fire service or career fire service. So 30 years ago, we were bringing people in that had a mechanical background, a carpentry background, an electrical background. They were all trade
Yes.
businesses.
Yeah.
And they brought a building construction knowledge forward with them. Hey, where'd you come? Oh, I used to be a roofer. Hey, what'd you do? I was an electrician. Well, they knew all the ins and outs of building construction from their trades. And that was on the career and volunteer side. And
Right.
then when you fast forward, through decades, there's not too many people coming into the fire service now that are involved in some sort of trade business. Sales, IT, things like that, but not the trade businesses for the most part. And that's created a huge education gap or information gap where we have firefighters that don't know how to work on a two-cycle motor or even start a two-cycle motor, and we've never supplemented that with education. Of all the essential rewrites and all the fundamentals, essentials, basic firefighting, we've added tremendous amounts of hours, but fire behavior, building construction, and building layouts very rarely get any time added to them. We added terrorism, hazmat, fire service history, all sorts of stuff we added to the program, but we didn't add the basics that are keeping people alive. And we've been losing the basics because they're not coming with it. We have people coming into the fire service that don't know what a Phillips screwdriver is.
Yeah.
Is that this one or is it this one? But is that the plus or the minus? People like the terminology has been lost, and we've never done anything to educate it or upgrade it on the education side. So we left a gap that is kind of our own doing. We've never
Yeah.
kept up with the things that we're missing.
Good stuff, man. We never really got to the topic we wanted to, but that's okay. We're an hour into this thing and we can always do a part two. You're 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 preaching to the choir in some senses, but you're also saying you're saying the hard lesson that everybody else needs to hear as well. So I appreciate that. I
Yeah.
think we're an hour in. I do have to I have some other stuff I have to get done. I only had an hour set aside for today. We might have to do a part two. Are you cool with that?
Yeah, we can figure something out.
We had like I don't know like 14 people watching on Facebook. I'm sure others will watch it on the other platforms once it gets uploaded. I know I saw a couple comments. I lost them now. Matt Schwartz, who works down in Washington D.C. He was commenting and had some. So you get a chance, check out the Facebook page and check out some of the comments. There's some pretty good stuff there.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, you're I think your message and the more people that we have on the podcast that has that opinion and it's just saying like, listen, this is a real problem and then not just identifying the problems, but giving options to address them. I think that's the other crucial part of the message is you're great. It's great identifying the problems. What's not great is having some kind of idea, whether it works or not, to address it. So that's being part of the solution as well. And I think that should be the goal as we move forward. But all right, man. Listen, I hate to be abrupt. I'm an hour in. My chief needs me to put some reports in that I've been lagging on, and I
No, I got
admit.
the same thing. I got some stuff I got to do.
I'm pretty sure he just called me about that a second ago, so I'm gonna go do that. But nonetheless, thank you so much for coming on. Discussion was freaking amazing.
Yeah.
It's
No, I'm
and like
very I'm
I
very
said.
passionate about some topics. Training's one of them,
Yeah.
I think it's the most important topic there could be. So
Well, I think we're knocking on the right doors, and we just need to continue to make progress on that effort, and then hopefully that hits the right people in the right areas, and it motivates them to be a little bit better, or at least strive to be a little better. So, all
yeah.
right, dude, you have a good rest of your day. I know you just got home from work a little while ago, so I'm sure you're dying to get some rest. So we'll catch up with you. All right.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Frank.
Thanks so much. See you, dude.
See ya.